You tried so hard, you fasted, you prayed, you denied yourself in every way you knew how. You stripped your life of comfort, of indulgence, of anything that could distract you from the pursuit of God. And still, deep down, something felt stuck. You thought maybe you weren't holy enough, maybe you needed to press harder, maybe you needed to empty yourself even more. Maybe the silence you heard, the answers you didn't receive, the peace you couldn't catch, maybe all of it meant you hadn't died to yourself deeply enough. But what if, just for a breath, you could imagine a different possibility? What if the reason your fasting felt powerless wasn't because you failed to eliminate enough? What if it was because you were trying to erase the wrong thing? You weren't just fasting from distractions. You were unknowingly fasting from yourself. You weren't just trying to quiet the noise around you. You were trying, without even realizing it, to silence the voice inside you that was crying out for compassion, for healing, for acknowledgement. And that voice? It was never your enemy. It was never the obstacle between you and God. It was the part of you He wanted most to meet. But somewhere along the way, someone told you that spirituality meant disappearing, that holiness meant self-erasure, that surrender meant silencing your own soul completely. And so you fasted not to find yourself again, but to lose yourself completely, believing that maybe then, finally, you would be acceptable to God. But God never asked you to starve your soul to prove your love. He asked you to bring your soul, broken, bruised, longing, into His presence, just as it is. Because the true purpose of fasting was never self-rejection. It was always about remembrance. Remembering who you are. Remembering who He is. Remembering the connection that was never meant to be severed by shame, by striving, by the endless race to be good enough. And maybe that's why your fasting felt hollow. Not because you lacked discipline, not because you weren't spiritual enough, but because fasting was never meant to be a way to punish yourself into holiness. It was meant to be a way to clear the way back to love, to clear the clutter, to clear the noise, to clear the layers of lies that told you you had to destroy yourself to deserve God. You don't have to destroy yourself to be loved. You were loved before you ever lifted a finger in devotion. And that part of you that you tried so hard to fast away, the part that still struggles, still aches, still longs for more, that part is not what God rejects. That part is what God wants to heal. But healing doesn't happen through erasure. Healing happens through presence, through allowing yourself to be seen, even when you feel unworthy. And so maybe the question isn't, how much more can I deny myself? Maybe the question is, how much more am I willing to be present with myself, just as I am? Because the fasting that changes you isn't the fasting that annihilates your soul. It's the fasting that removes everything standing in the way of meeting yourself, the self God created, the self He called good from the very beginning. You were not called to fast yourself out of existence. You were called to fast away the lies that told you your existence was a burden. You were not called to silence your desires. You were called to listen to them, to let them lead you back to the deeper hunger that only God can satisfy. And maybe that's why you're here, right now. Maybe that's why something inside you has always known that striving alone was never enough. Because you were never meant to strive your way into acceptance. You were meant to rest your way into truth. The truth that says, you, exactly as you are worth meeting. You, with all your complexity, are worth loving. You, with all your unspoken fears and hidden hopes, are worth redeeming, not erasing. This is the beginning of a new kind of fasting, not from food alone, not from comfort alone, but from shame, from self-rejection, from the endless cycle of trying to earn a place you were already given. And if that sounds scary, if it sounds almost too good to be true, that's okay. It only means your soul is waking up again. Waking up to the idea that maybe you don't have to be less human to be more holy. Maybe you were designed to be both, fully human and fully beloved. Maybe the greatest fast you can ever choose is the fast from the belief that you are too broken to be called beautiful. In the next part, we'll walk deeper into what fasting was truly meant to be. Not an escape from yourself, but a return to yourself. a return to the you that God never stopped loving, even when you tried so hard to disappear, because you were never meant to vanish in order to be found. You were meant to be found exactly as you are. Fasting, at its heart, was never supposed to be about diminishing your humanity. It was supposed to be about clearing the space so that your humanity could finally breathe again, free from the noise, free from the demand, free from the expectations that smothered the soul you were born with. The world teaches you to strive. Religion, sometimes without meaning to, teaches you to perform. Your own inner fears teach you to hide. And so, without realizing it, fasting became another performance, another way to prove, another way to say, "Look, God, I am serious. Look how much I can deny myself. Look how much I can sacrifice to make you love me more." But friend, He already loved you before the fasting, before the striving, before the desperate need to prove your devotion. His love was not waiting on your sacrifice, it was waiting on your present. And yet, how often have we tried to fast ourselves into worthiness? How often have we used spiritual disciplines, beautiful in their original purpose, as weapons against our own tenderness? You told yourself that if you were uncomfortable enough, if you stripped away enough, God would finally look your way with favor. But here's the truth. He never needed you to be uncomfortable to be beloved. He never needed you to suffer more deeply to see you more clearly. The fast that changes you isn't about erasing yourself. It's about returning to yourself, the true self, the one buried under the layers of fear, guilt, shame, and survival. The you that knows how to listen to the quiet voice inside, not the one that screams condemnation. The you that longs for more than religious perfection, that longs for real connection. The you that, when all the noise is stripped away, still dares to hope that being loved doesn't require disappearing first. And that is what fasting, in its purest form, invites you into. Not destruction, not self-punishment, but awakening. A fasting from every lie that said you had to become less in order to be worthy of love. A fasting from the voices that told you your emotions were too much, your dreams were too wild, your struggles were too ugly to bring into the presence of a holy God. Because holiness isn't fragile, holiness is strong enough to hold your humanity. Holiness isn't offended by your imperfections. Holiness embraces them, and in embracing, transforms them. But to experience that, you have to stop running. You have to stop using spiritual practices as shields against your own soul. You have to dare to believe that your brokenness doesn't disqualify you from intimacy. It prepares you for it. Because the closer you get to your real heart, the closer you get to His. It was never about you disappearing. It was about you reappearing, raw, honest, beloved. The fast that heaven celebrates is the fast from shame, the fast from self-hatred, the fast from the story that says you must diminish yourself to magnify God. You don't magnify God by pretending you don't exist. You magnify Him by existing fully, by living fully, by letting His love restore you until you can no longer tell where your heart ends and His begins. Think about the heroes of faith, the ones we admire and quote and preach about. David didn't become a man after God's own heart by annihilating his emotion. He brought his emotions into the presence of God, messy, beautiful, real. Moses didn't become a leader because he was fearless. He became a leader because, even in fear, he showed up with his whole, trembling self. Jesus didn't call perfect people to follow Him. He called the broken, the bruised, the doubters, the dreamers, and He made them whole, not by demanding their silence, but by inviting their voices. And now, it's your turn, not to disappear, not to fast yourself out of existence, but to fast from every voice that ever told you you weren't already beloved. You don't have to fast away your personality. You don't have to fast away your dream. You don't have to fast away your humanity. You fast away the fear. You fast away the shame. You fast away the lie that says you are unacceptable unless you change everything first. And you feast, yes, feast on the truth. That who you are is already a place where God delights to dwell. Not who you pretend to be. Not who you think you have to become after enough fasting and striving and spiritual exhaustion. Who you are, right now, here, as you listen, as you breathe, as you dare to hope. And in that place, that raw, sacred place, real fasting begins. The fasting that doesn't starve you, the fasting that frees you, the fasting that says, I will no longer starve my soul of love. I will no longer withhold grace from myself. I will no longer make my humanity the enemy of my holiness. Because they were never meant to be enemy, they were always meant to dance together, humanity and holiness, embracing in the tender, sacred rhythm of real life. In the next part, we'll walk even deeper into what it looks like to stop running from yourself during fasting and to start welcoming the parts you once tried to exile. We'll see how bringing your whole self into the presence of God isn't just permitted, it's necessary for true healing to begin. Because the miracle you've been fasting for might just be waiting for the moment you finally stop fasting from yourself. When you stop trying to fast yourself away, something shifts inside you. It's subtle at first, like a faint melody you can barely hear under the noise. But if you listen closely, it's there, a call, a whisper, a memory of the person you were always meant to be, buried not under sin, but under shame, not lost because you were too broken, but hidden because you were too scared to believe you were worthy of being found. This is the sacred beginning of true restoration, not fixing yourself, not improving yourself, not erasing yourself, but meeting yourself. And meeting yourself requires a different kind of courage than most people talk about. It's not the courage to conquer the world, it's the courage to sit still long enough to hear the parts of your heart you've been trained to ignore, the parts that ache, the parts that dream, the parts that rage and weep and long for something more. Because those parts, even the messy ones, even the unspiritual ones, are not your enemies. They are echoes of your soul's deepest truth. You were made for connection, not exile. But for so long, you thought the goal of fasting was to get rid of those parts. You thought that if you silenced them long enough, suppressed them hard enough, punished them severely enough, you would finally be acceptable. You thought spirituality was a war against yourself. But what if real spirituality is a reunion, a homecoming, a laying down of weapons, a sitting down at the table with every part of you, even the parts you thought God despised, and hearing Him say, I love all of you, even this, the anger you tried to fast away? Maybe it wasn't rebellion, maybe it was a signal that something unjust inside you still needed to be healed. The sadness you tried to silence, maybe it wasn't weakness, maybe it was sacred mourning over places where your heart had been broken, and God was grieving with you. The dreams you kept pushing down, maybe they weren't distractions, maybe they were invitations, holy whispers planted by God before you ever learned how to doubt. What if the parts of yourself you most wanted to fast away are the very places God wants to meet you most intimately, and not to shame you, not to change you into someone else, but to heal you into the fullness of who you were always becoming? Because you were never meant to treat yourself like the enemy. You were meant to befriend your soul. You were meant to nurture your heart. You were meant to walk with God not as a shadow of who you are, but as the living, breathing reflection of His image. That means the practice of fasting changes. It stops being an act of self-denial designed to earn God's approval. It becomes an act of self-return, a journey of removing what is false so that what is true can breathe again. You don't fast away your dreams. You fast away the fear that told you your dreams were too big. You don't fast away your emotion. You fast away the shame that said your emotions made you weak. You don't fast away your humanity. You fast away the lie that your humanity is something to be overcome rather than embraced. And in doing so, you start to realize the real enemy was never you. The real enemy was every false story you believed about yourself. The real enemy was every heavy yoke of perfectionism, performance, and self-rejection that twisted the meaning of devotion into self-erasure. God never asked for your disappearance. He asked for your heart, your whole heart, wounded and wondering, raw and real. Because the parts you hide in shame are the very places His love longs to dwell, not to condemn you, not to control you, but to cradle you into healing. This is what fasting was always meant to create. Not absence, Not emptiness, but space, wide, sacred space, where your true self could rise again and breathe in the presence of unshakable love. The you that dares to dream again, the you that trusts that your voice matters, the you that knows being fully alive doesn't disqualify you from holiness. It draws you deeper into it. And yes, it will be uncomfortable sometimes. Yes, it will feel awkward to sit with emotions you once tried to fast away. Yes, it will stretch your spirit to believe that God isn't ashamed of your mess. But this is how freedom begins. Freedom isn't neat. Freedom isn't sterile. Freedom is raw and honest and wild and holy. It's the quiet revolution of loving the places you were taught to despise. It's the radical decision to stop hiding from yourself and start welcoming yourself home. And when you do, when you finally dare to be present with every part of who you are, you realize you were never disqualified. You were never too much. You were never too broken. You were simply waiting for a love big enough to hold your whole story. And now, you're learning to believe it's already yours. In the next part, we'll dive into the beauty of restoration, how fasting from self-rejection leads you into the most powerful encounter of all, meeting yourself with the same kindness that God has always extended toward you. Because the miracle isn't becoming someone else. The miracle is finding out you were never too lost to be loved exactly as you are. When you finally stop fasting away your soul and start welcoming it back, something profound happens. You begin to see yourself with new eyes, not the critical eyes of fear or shame, but the compassionate eyes of the one who formed you. You start to realize that your brokenness is not a barrier to connection. It is the place where connection becomes most real. Because intimacy with God was never built on your ability to hide your cracks. It was built on your willingness to bring your cracks into the light. And what once felt like disqualification now becomes the very place where love is allowed to do its deepest work. This is the beauty of restoration. It doesn't erase your story. It redeems it. It doesn't deny your humanity. It dignifies. It doesn't demand you to be flawless. It invites you to be faithful. Faithful enough to stay present with yourself, even when every instinct taught you to run. Faithfulness doesn't always look like grandeur. Sometimes, it looks like sitting with the parts of you you once exiled, the dreams you buried, the emotions you shamed, the longings you silenced, and telling them, you are welcome here now. It looks like offering hospitality to your own soul, not because your soul is perfect, but because it is worthy of love. And in offering that hospitality to yourself, you mirror the hospitality of God, because God is not afraid of the rooms inside you that you've been too scared to enter. He walks into them without hesitation. He sits down in the dust and brokenness without flinching. He lights candles in the darkest places of your heart and says, I am still here. I have always been here. Restoration is not a return to an idealized version of yourself that never struggled. It is a return to the true you, the you that is able to hold your humanity with tenderness, the you that knows love is stronger than fear. This kind of restoration changes how you fast, how you pray, how you live. You no longer fast to erase yourself. You fast to come home. You fast to strip away the noise that kept you from hearing the still, small voice within, the voice that has been whispering all along, you are mine. You are loved. You are enough. And as you begin to hear that voice again, something inside you awakens. Hope, courage, gentleness. The kind of gentleness that says, I don't have to fight myself anymore to be holy. I don't have to hate myself to be close to God. I don't have to disappear to be seen. Instead, you start to build a life on a different foundation, not the shaky ground of endless striving, but the solid rock of being beloved. You start to pray differently. You stop begging for worth and start breathing in belonging. You stop asking for permission to exist and start thanking God for the life He placed inside you, a life that is sacred simply because He chose to create it. You stop trying to earn love through sacrifice and start experiencing love through surrender, not the surrender of yourself, but the surrender to love itself. And it is here, in this surrendered place, that you meet the real miracle. The miracle is not that you finally become someone else. The miracle is that you finally recognize yourself and find that God has been recognizing you all along. The miracle is that you no longer have to hide. You no longer have to strive. You no longer have to be at war with yourself. You are free to be fully human, fully loved, fully alive. And that freedom doesn't make you less spiritual, it makes you more. Because spirituality was never about escaping your humanity. It was about embodying it, carrying the divine within the dust of your being, and letting that reality heal not just your soul, but the world around you. When you live from that place, fasting becomes celebration, prayer becomes communion, life becomes worship. You are no longer trying to claw your way into God's favor. You are living from the unshakable truth that you were always already His favorite. And from that truth, you move differently. You love differently. You forgive differently. You dream differently, not because you are forcing yourself to be more spiritual, but because you are finally living in alignment with who you are at the deepest level, a soul deeply, irrevocably loved. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to walk out this restoration daily, how to keep choosing self-compassion, how to recognize when old patterns of self-erasure try to creep back in, and how to cultivate a life where your humanity and your spirituality no longer fight each other, but flow together as one beautiful, unstoppable river. Because the journey doesn't end at being found, it begins. And your heart, your whole, unedited, messy, beautiful heart, is the place where heaven is ready to write its next story. Learning to live in restoration is not a one-time awakening. It's a rhythm, a choice you make again and again, to see yourself through the lens of love, not lack. To meet yourself not with judgment, but with curiosity. To treat your soul not as a project to fix, but as a home to nurture. Because the world will keep trying to pull you back into the old stories. Stories that say you're only worthy if you're perfect. Stories that whisper you must earn love through exhaustion. Stories that insist holiness can only happen through hiding your humanity. But now you know better. Now you know the real work is not disappearing into the shadows of fear and shame. The real work is standing in the light, vulnerable, honest, human, and daring to believe that's exactly where you are meant to be. And this changes everything. When you start to live from this place of restoration, fasting itself transforms. It stops being about punishing your body or soul. It becomes about clearing space to stay connected. Connected to your Creator. Connected to your own heart. Connected to the life unfolding inside you, even in ways you don't always understand. You no longer fast to annihilate yourself. You fast to remember yourself. You fast to silence the voices of fear, not the voice of your own longing. You fast to break agreement with shame, not with your humanity. You fast not to make yourself smaller, but to make more room inside for the life that was always trying to bloom. Because healing is not just removing pain, it's building new pattern. It's waking up each day and choosing, sometimes with trembling hands, sometimes with tired hope, to align with the truth or still learning to trust. I am loved. I am wanted. I am a vessel of beauty, even when I still feel broken. I am a carrier of divine breath, even when I don't feel strong. You walk into your days differently. You don't shrink when your heart speaks. You listen. You don't dismiss your desires as dangerous. You honor them, weigh them, and walk with wisdom. You don't silence your emotions. You invite them to sit at the table, knowing God sits there too, not condemning, but communing. Because your emotions are not obstacles to your faith, they are invitations deeper into it. And as you build this rhythm of self-return, day after day, choice after choice, you begin to notice small miracles. You find peace in places that used to trigger panic. You find gentleness for parts of yourself you once despised. You find courage to stay present in moments where you used to flee. You find that the God you were seeking through all your striving was never far off. He was within, waiting for you to come home to yourself, waiting to whisper, "You were never meant to fast yourself into emptiness. You were meant to feast on the fullness of who you are in me." And you start to understand, restoration is not about becoming something you are not. It's about removing what never truly belonged, the shame, the fear, the lies, so that what is real and radiant can emerge. The self you lost trying to be enough? God was never trying to erase that self. He was trying to redeem it. The dreams you shelved in the name of false humility? Maybe they were seeds of heaven, waiting for the right season to bloom. The voice inside you that you buried under years of not good enough? Maybe it's the very voice God wants to amplify in the earth. And this isn't arrogant. This isn't rebellion. This is what happens when someone stops fasting from themselves and starts feasting on grace. You become bold. You become tender. You become dangerous to every system of shame and smallness that tried to silence you, because you, fully alive, are a threat to darkness. You, fully loved, are a mirror of light. You, fully human and fully holy, are a testimony to the unstoppable kindness of God. And so, you keep walking, not perfectly, not without fear, but with a new kind of faith, the kind that knows falling is not failure, and rising is written into your bones. You live now from love, not for it. You create now from connection, not from craving approval. You fast now not to erase yourself, but to stay fiercely present with the truth. You are already enough. You are already wanted. You are already beloved. And every breath you take from this place, every prayer, every step, every dream becomes an offering, not an offering of desperation, an offering of delight, an offering that says, "Here I am, God, whole and becoming, loved and learning, broken and beautiful. All of me, present, available, yours." And heaven smiles, because heaven was never waiting for a better version of you. Heaven was waiting for you to finally believe the truth. You, exactly as you are the miracle. You are the answered prayer. You are the beloved child. You are the living testimony that grace wins, love restores. The story is not over. It's just beginning.